Good evening, everyone. Thank you for coming. I certainly appreciate you being here. Welcome to the regular board meeting of the Board of Education, Monday, January 11th, 2016. Doing a roll call, Mrs. Frida?
Okay. Simmons?
Here.
Odom? Here. Marks? Yes. Horace? Here. Huckabee? Here. Paredes?
Here, and the quorum is present. First up, we have audience comments. And I see that there are no audience comments, so we will move on to the next agenda item, which is the recognition of the 8th grade girls basketball team that qualified for state.
Thank you. Mr. Nowitzki, if you could please come up, and after we've given them their accolades and we have a certificate for them, we'd like to have a picture so that you can post it on the website as well. Thank you.
Thank you everyone for coming tonight. It's always an awesome experience when I get to come up here and talk about something good that happened at Parker Junior High School, both academically as well as extracurricular. And this year we had a fascinating season for our 8th grade girls basketball team. We started off red hot in our conference play. We went undefeated in our conference play, winning all, I want to make sure I said this right, winning all 14 games. We then went on to the regional, and we defeated 2 more teams to get to 16-0, taking us to the sectional final, where we played Cal City, and we defeated them and earned our first ever girls basketball trip downstate. Downstate was in Rochester, Illinois. If you don't know where that's at, that is a little bit farther, about 20 minutes past Springfield, and earned an Elite 8 bid with a record of 17-0. When we got down there, unfortunately, we drew the defending state champs from Morton, and they were up to the task, but we fell short in that game. Ultimately finishing the season at 17-1, extremely proud of each and every one of the girls that was on that team, the effort they showed from start to finish, from the first person out there to the end of the bench. Extremely proud of our coaches and the effort they put in, and we certainly want to recognize them tonight for an outstanding and memorable season. So if you are one of our Lady Falcons from the 8th grade girls basketball team, I see several, I'd like you to come up here. Coach Thompson, I'd also like you to come up here. We will read off the names of those of you that are here. We'll read off all the names for our girls, not all could be here tonight. We'll give you a certificate, and we'll send you around to shake the members, board members' hands tonight. So if you are one of the Lady Falcons that's here tonight, come on up. All right, let's make a line right here. Now, Coach, I don't know the roster as well as I should, so if you could go ahead and introduce the 6 girls that are here, that are able to make it tonight, and ask Coach Thompson, says your name, go ahead and raise your hand, and then when he's done, we'll start over here. We'll go shake Mr. Simmons' hand, we'll go around, get our certificate, and we'll take a picture over there. So, Coach, take it away.
Hi. We have Ashley Malone. Leah Cunningham. Layla Luggins. Samara Hicks. Jada Tucker.
And just so you know, they're not here, of course, but just so we can recognize the other girls that were here. I'm going to read the entire roster that we have here. And we had Jada McKelker, who was here, Bria Smith, Kayla Brown, Leoa London, Karina Carbajal. Karina was the team captain, is that correct? Am I making sure I get that right? Okay. Ashley Malone, Lauren Lucas, Lee Jones, Nia Cunningham, Samari Meeks, Maya Harrell, and Jory Lobbin. That was our team. So if we could give our team one more round of applause.
try to give you some 1, 2, 3s here. I'll make some bigs on the website, on Twitter. Ready, girls? 1, 2, 3. Take one more here. 1, 2, 3. What else who wants to get a picture? Go ahead and get their consent. If we could have one more round of applause for our Lady Falcons.
Good job, ladies. Good job.
Once again, thank you, Lady Falcons. Excellent job. Next on the agenda, we have the superintendent's report. Dr. Duster.
Thank you. Enrollment dashboard is posted. We are staying steady with our sections. We are seeing some growth at Heather Hill, though, which we're pleased to see at this point. And with that being said, my second item is Wellness Day. We came back on January 4th after a wonderful vacation. And as we came back, our staff was involved in many different wellness activities, and we greatly appreciate all the efforts. I know that Ms. Wilson had a great part in doing that and taking care of it, so thank you. Number 3, our para-joint committee meeting. We have had 3 meetings now in regards to that, and we are going through that discussion about where we need to go as far as the evaluation model, that'll be part of that, how we are evaluating staff, etc. So it is going well, and we are making progress. The next thing, there's a student discipline conference. We've been working real hard this year through our ECC group, which is a group of administrators and teachers. We're looking at restorative justice practices. We are looking at different discipline options that are out there for us. In addition, there is this conference, and it'll be in Lisle. There will be a team along with myself who will be discussing the policies that will need to take place next fall. So that information that we gather will be incorporated into a plan we'll bring next to the Board of Education as we develop it. It'll be later this spring. And the last thing, you'll see a green bucket over there. And this is the second year we're partnering with the village, and we have the Martin Luther King Jr. It's a food drive, and basically there's specific items that they're asking for. If you have children in school already, your schools have, your building principals have already sent information home. So what we are doing is asking for different types of donations, and on Friday the village will be picking that up, and they'll be distributing them and helping out people in our area. So that is all I have from the superintendent report.
Very good.
Yeah, we have boxes too, but we thought that looked better than a box.
Yeah, it's mostly vitamins. These are
Yeah.
Okay, well, thank you. Next on our, are there any questions? Next on our agenda is the committee reports from the tri-conference, for which I, Mrs. Odom, Mrs. Huckabee, and Mrs. Horace attended right before Thanksgiving in November. I'm happy to share what I have, unless there is a board member who'd rather go first and share their experience. You want to go first, Mrs. Odom? Okay.
On Sunday, I think we split up. I went to Vision 2020 Successes and Challenges, Fulfilling the Promise of Public Education. It was basically an update on where they've been, what they've done, and where they're planning on going with the Vision 2020. The biggest thing, of course, is that They want to expand this year, Vision 2020, to begin a wider committee, wider net. Right now, they have just formed an executive committee which worked for the whole year at creating the legislative plan and how Vision 2020 was going to look. Now they're expanding it to educators, to 3 seats from the IASB board, teachers, principals, and superintendents. They're going to implement a differentiated accountability system, and they're going to focus on actually getting legislation passed. They did get one small bill passed this year, but nothing pretty major, really major, just a funding bill. I also went to a park international proficiency program where they talked about where we stood in relation to the whole country in Illinois and then in a smaller community, in different smaller communities. And just like our district, every district in Illinois had a 50% deficiency at 3rd grade, the 3rd grade, 4th grade gap, and the 5th grade, 6th grade gap. They have completed the algebra portion, and they feel as though the government, if it goes to the other party, that they're going to do away with Common Core anyway. And then we did the, that's the same thing. That's pretty much it. We went to I went to the delegate meeting. It went really fast. We elected a new president for this year. As you know, Karen Fisher did not get reelected to her school board post, so she could not continue as president. And we went, and the meeting was like record timing. We were in and out like a flash. And that's about it.
That's fantastic. Other board members, did you have any reflections you wanted to share? Or I'm happy to share mine first. I just didn't want to. Okay, fantastic. Okay, so I promise I won't make this long and drawn out, but in tour of the vendors, there are a lot of interesting ideas, one of which I saw from DLA Architects, who did a lot of work over at the high school. And it was really something I saw as something on their slideshow, which was this enormous wall that was a giant whiteboard for kids to go out in the hallway and do elaborate math questions and science questions. And I thought it was great because it really got kids out of the desk, out of their classrooms, into the halls, doing things that were interesting, things that could be left up where other kids could interact with them. So, I immediately found Green Associates and asked them, hey, is that something that still is doable in our school? And, we talked about it, and they said, yeah, it's really just a matter of a paint finish. And I think what's significant about that, or at least what I took away from that, is the theme from the conference, which really is that there is a huge paradigm shift in education. We are really getting away from this 1956 Bloom's taxonomy, where we have this hierarchy of thinking, and we really are moving into Webb's depth of knowledge, where you are looking at different kinds of cognitive tasks that are all tied together, which, aside from stilted educational language, really are about kids all working together at different levels, and it's an ongoing process that we're always engaged in. And this was also true as a theme when I went to the principal executive workshop with Ms. Huckabee, where they looked at the pipeline of recruiting your future leaders in your district, where the way things are today, at a state level and at a district level, we don't have these mechanisms in place where we really are supporting a great, administrative training programs from the university level all the way on up through our district, and certainly supported at a state level with some sort of sustainable mentoring system. And the shift is really from this panel, because several people, I think there are like 7 altogether, the central theme was that we really do need to shift away from what we've been doing back in the 50s and this sort of lingering model, this top-down model that we've had, and really work toward collaboration. That, the principal is the second most important person in the building as it affects student learning, and that their job is really about adult learning, and it is about supporting, adults to be more effective in their jobs throughout the school, and certainly, in their classrooms and in their support roles in the classrooms as well. And that we really need as a community to push our legislators to support this so that we are able to better recruit and support our administrators and give them the tools by which they can be then supportive to people in the classroom. I thought it was a fantastic discussion. Ms. Huckabee, I hope you agree with me.
It definitely was, and also talked about, I don't want to take away from your time, but it helps me to understand that what the real issue is in terms of recruiting teachers. There is certainly a shortage of that, but also we can't get the teachers. There's also a problem recruiting principals and getting high-quality principals, and the ways in which they are trying to do that is to start and trying to find a way to recruit more people into education, because it is a dire need there.
It is.
So certainly help me to understand when I hear that we don't have certified teachers and there's a shortage. It helped me understand that it is really going to be very serious since people are not coming into education.
One of the things that Vision 2020 Committee did pass legislation to grant reciprocity to teachers across states so that they can come in first, start working, and then work on getting their certification for Illinois. And so that was one of the legislation that they got passed this year.
Well, moving on to the first general session, I hope you will let me summarize that it really was centered on this theme of getting out of the box. I will say very candidly that a lot of people left that session early. It was not something that I think stuck with a lot of people. But I'm glad I stayed because, I think that she really had some great messages, and that was that you shouldn't get out of your status quo, and that you should not live with regrets, and eventually you should have to do the hard thing if necessary. And in some cases, that's being very proactive in your communities to make sure that we are supported and we are supporting education at all levels. And that ultimately we have to set an example for our children. That's just not something that we do for ourselves, but it's something that we do for future generations as well. Moving on to the second general session, I thought that it was interesting. It was the president of the University of Maryland in Baltimore, where, and again, I'm going to sort of summarize here, he really emphasized that there is a big shift in the way that even you teach at a university level, and he's very proud to say that University of Maryland in Baltimore was certainly a pioneer in changing the classroom in universities, where it's not just an expert head, just spouting information in the front of the class, but really more collaborative environments, things that really reflect the workplace. And that it's a slow process, but that is shifting, and that is definitely changing. And then we need to have a stronger connection all the way along that pipeline for kids from kindergarten all the way up through university levels. One of the mantras he kind of went over was that he said you really have to be careful that your thoughts don't become your words, and that your words don't become your actions, and that your actions don't become your behaviors don't become your habits don't become your character, because it all will become your destiny. And if you are not careful from that foundational level, then it all builds up to a future that is very difficult to change if you're not willing to address things at that initial level. And that certainly the future of our education system is really at university level, certainly in our or elementary level as well. The third gentleman that we saw, where Mrs. Odom and I sat on a Sunday morning, it was a guy who fought his way from Kentucky in a snowstorm, and which is part of the shtick, which was very funny about that. But he was there to talk about the hero effect. Ultimately, the hero effect comes down to show up and do an excellent job, and don't expect to be rewarded. The reward is really in the doing, that you've made a better environment around you. And that ultimately, if you're not willing to do it, then you have to ask, well, who is? And so, heroes take responsibility to make everyone else's lives a little bit better without worrying about themselves. And again, I think that is certainly the shift that we see in education from elementary all the way up through university level. Mrs. Odom and I also attended a few roundtable discussions, two of which were on the STEM programs offered by Northern Illinois University. Although we are currently working with Northwestern, I believe, there certainly is a lot of great resources that we certainly can look at from Northern as well. But one of the other interesting things that they mentioned in that roundtable discussion was the idea of STEAM as well, where it's not just science, technology, engineering, and mathematics. It's also science, technology, engineering, arts, mathematics, and then there was a variety of other STEM, STEAMs, STEMmer. They had really went through a whole bunch of them because people are really looking at our model of teaching differently is something that's more hands-on. And lastly, I have gone through several board president roundtables, but at the end of which, and certainly this is reflected by STEAM, is that everything is really needs to be supported on all levels, and that we are ultimately dependent on a change of attitude if we were to make lasting and sustained and meaningful changes in our education system. And we need to do that at all levels, and that we need to practice that from top to bottom and from left to right. And that was my experience. Did you want to share anything else?
I can share. I will be brief. I did not stay for the entire conference, which I had not planned to originally anyway. But went to several good sessions. I'm heavily interested in community engagement, and so a couple of the sessions that I went to focused on community engagement. And a lot of lessons learned and takeaways I think came out of that. In particular, districts expanding how we think about community engagement, and it's not just our neighbors, but it's also how we engage our children in the community, how we engage the high school. They strongly encourage school districts to work more closely together around community engagement and having your elementary and junior high school districts work a lot closer with your high school districts. That was a huge thing in that. But also encouraging districts to not think about community engagement as sort of us talking at the community and us just presenting information, but also receiving it, and then more importantly, what we do with that information. So it's one thing to have community forums and everybody gets a voice, but it's even more important for us to figure out how we digest that and how we decide to use it as a school district. And that community engagement it's a process. It's not, here are the 5 things that we are going to do, and voila, we have successfully engaged our community. That it is a process, so we need to think about it on an ongoing basis, activity after activity, but really engaging also in this sort of reflective exercise and figuring out how we want to actually use that information. So connecting with high school, looking at community engagement more as a process, but also figuring out how do we also give all the kids who we serve a voice in this entire process. So that was actually a really good session. The other session was, it focused on the supports that are available to school districts across the state that are underperforming. But what I was most interested in, as well as a lot of other people in the audience, is what about those school districts that don't meet that threshold of underperforming and are just right on the cusp, or, so how do we work to make sure we stay a performing school district? And so there was not enough discussion about that. And then the third session, I'll let Merle talk about. We ended up being in the same session, but it was more about databases and tools, which wasn't what I thought it was going to be, so.
Well, I'll just piggyback on what you were talking about, the data analytics for Illinois School, which is a Forecast 5 system, which includes everything from academic performance all the way down to the actual budget, and also how they take what the state requirements and the benchmarks are and how they compare this with the demographics of each school. As well as not just only looking at that data from, just the academic performance, they are also trying to make, and I won't say make, but they're trying to put into the plan of having teachers' performance tied to, the way that kids perform on statewide exams and assessments, of course, within the district. So the 5 site, which I actually was able to grab 7 of the last copies that they had, because I thought this was really interesting to bring back. But I have one for everyone, because I thought that everyone should see it. But the staffing and compensation, academic performance, enrollment trends and demographics, the English language learners, budget performance, how all of this data can be used for us to make the best decisions in the administrative process, even as stakeholders being educated about this. Because what I found for me, this was for me more of a professional learning environment with my role here. But even as a parent, when you're throwing data, what does that data actually mean? And how we can break it down, and how the board and the administrators, which we're doing that with universities and parent universities in some sense, but it's that data piece that I think that people are struggling, the parents are struggling, and sometimes internally they are struggling to be able to put the numbers together with the standards and what do we do. And then they talk a lot about PARC, and that's going to be a challenge, but of course nobody knows exactly where that's going to go, and at that time the results and stuff were not out. Also to piggyback a little bit about what Steve was talking about, the high quality principal for every school in Illinois. They were also talking too about when you're selecting a principal, even though we're coming up on a shortage, a lot of times the benefit is what you have in your staff. You have staff members who meet those qualifications and maybe have an interest in being able to take a closer look at, your inner staff and see what you can get out of that and their interest. And basically, also on the civil decision making, I brought back information on that. Again, we're talking about legislation, but what the roles are of the trustees. They talk about the public values, the psychologicals, the discipline to solve problems. A lot of information. And the other thing was there was so much out there that you just did not have time. So a lot of these meetings were happening simultaneously. A lot of these meetings were happening simultaneously, but you could not. You have to cut off what you were attending to get to the others. So I think that they definitely need to have a little bit longer of a conference, or maybe more time frames for.
One of the suggestions that I had was, and again, this could just come down to that believing it's a disincentive to attend the chart conferences, is in some way recording these conversations or archiving these discussions, because as you said, there were so many great discussions out there, and there were so many great presentations out there that, even if you can get the slide presentation, you get the notes that go with it, but it doesn't, there's just so much more. And, that's the reality of, I've just finished my 3rd master's degree in education last December, and I can say categorically, I don't have, I'm just now realizing there's a lot more questions. And it's an endless, I bought several books that I hope I get around to the chance to read, and there's just so much more in understanding what's out there. But if you could at least have some way to, make it digestible and, have that be something that boards can have access to. And community members too. I think that would certainly further a lot of the, the concerns and issues of the Tri-Conference. So, well, thank you all for sharing. I certainly appreciate that. Next on our agenda. Yeah, sure.
Do we have some action items that we plan to move forward with? And you mentioned some really interesting things. Do we plan on moving forward with any action items?
Well, I think that certainly we can. I think what would be very helpful is if we took and made bullet points for each other, and then from there, if having had this brief discussion, if we could, as a board, perhaps in the next COW, we could think about some things we want to move forward with. So I think the next step from here is to just write out some bullet points that we think are worthwhile, and share it out with each other, and then see what we think about this next COW and see what we'd like to move forward with.
Do we have any intention of signing the Vision 2020 petition or putting that on the agenda to discuss?
Well, I think that since I think we should. I think we should certainly have a discussion about it.
Been asking for a few months, so that'd be great if we
I
can
know.
get it on the agenda.
Yes, and I have been investigating for a few months as well, but it's been changing.
Well, the Vision 2020 itself and the petition has not changed at all since
Okay.
the initial implementation. They have 522 districts
Yes,
that
and
signed on to it. It would be great for our district
when
if we
you
looked at it.
when you first brought that up, I called Ben Shoreham and I talked to him about that, and he made the suggestion of why not we wait for a few months, see what things look like in the conference, and then afterwards approach it then.
I don't think Ben has ever suggested that because the Vision 2020 is ISD's signature legislative achievement, and it's the one thing they want every member school district to sign on to.
Okay, I can only tell you what he talked to me about on the phone, but
Because when I talked to him at the conference, he was very eager to have us sign on, as they're included all the districts sign on.
okay, again, I can only tell you about our
So can you
conversation.
put it on the agenda for next month for our COW?
Certainly we can think about it.
I'm asking now if I could have support from 3 members to get it on the agenda to discuss at the next COW, since that's, I think, what it takes to put something on an agenda. Okay, thank you.
Anyone else?
Great.
I have no objection to it.
And I'd like to see it on the agenda for the next.
Okay,
Thank you, Mr. President.
you're very welcome, Mrs. Marks.
Appreciate it.
Absolutely. Any other questions?
Oh, one thing I did want to bring up, when you were talking about the vendors, the after-school, they have a lot of after-school programs, I think, instead of after-school being, and this is just, what the juvenile was saying, instead of after-school being more so like a babysitting, a babysitting for parents that are working past those hours where school is in session, to have more programs that are designed that help kids in tutoring them in possibly the areas, not just homework, but that's a major component too, but in the areas of where the Common Core, some of the standards and the things that we are having difficulty with at the district. Because I know across, Illinois, a lot of schools that were there, they were performed, they were talking about, they did really well. But again, everybody was waiting for the park exam to come out, so that no one knew. But these after-school programs mostly being geared towards more than just babysitting, perhaps homework, also, tutoring kind of sessions. So that's something I wanted to mention too.
And just one more point, along the line of the vendors. So the high school field house was very visible at the conference. And they assured me that next year, Parker, our renovation will be equally as visible next year, so.
Fantastic.
It was on the book, on the board.
It was on, yeah, but when you go into the marketplace, there was like, this beautiful picture of the field house, and they said, okay, next year it will be Parker.
Yeah, it's right inside the first page.
And they did an honorable mention during the general session.
Okay, any other comments? All right. Next on the agenda, we have the consent agenda, which looks like 2 items, minutes, 3, I'm sorry. No, 4. Oh, you're right, there's 4. Minutes of hearing for the 2015 Regular Board of Education meeting, December 14, 2015. Executive session meeting, December 14, 2015. We also have item C, gifts, district PTO, donation toward eChalk, $5,000, and outdoor education scholarships, $2,500, and Alan DeCastro donation to be used by Serena Hills for $25,000. We also have appointment of the Associate Superintendent to prepare the budget, as well as FOIA requests. I will entertain them. Okay, which one?
Do you want to pull it?
Do you remember what the correction was?
Yeah, it's the December 14th minutes, it's just a new flag statement on the vote. On page 6, on the roll call vote for the restriction of discretionary spending from budget function 2210, Mr. Simmons and I voted nay. However, it also shows that I voted aye.
To me, true.
I know, I'm good. It was a definite nay.
And that's it?
Yeah.
Did anyone else find anything correctable in the minutes aside from that? Okay. Yeah, I'll entertain a motion to accept, well, why don't we pull that out? And then we'll come back to that. I'll make a motion to accept items C, D, and E.
I make a motion to approve the consent agenda items C, D, and E.
Second. We will roll call, Mr. Farina. I'm sorry, sure.
I want to note the gifts that were given. We greatly appreciate the PTO for the donation to eChalk for $5,000, as well as $2,500 for outdoor ed. Greatly appreciated. In addition to that, Ellen DeCastro, I want to tell just a little bit about that. It was very impressive. When he was a young boy, he went to Serena School, and while he was there, he felt very blessed. The teachers really helped him, and it was home for him. And with that being said, he had contacted our school system, and he had asked if he could do something. So we were thinking small, maybe backpacks for kids or something of that nature. And he goes, no, I'm thinking a little bit more than that. So what he had stated is that he wanted to provide $25,000 to Serena. We're working with that on what we're going to do after it's extended, but it'll definitely go for the kids and their educational endeavors at Serena. It's something that is greatly needed. So I wanted to note that. I will be giving him a call this week and talking to him personally after this has been done. But that is a great donation and greatly appreciated.
Is he here tonight?
He lives in California.
Thank you.
Yes.
Something.
Yeah.
That's really very generous, to say the least. Can we have a roll call, Mrs. Pino?
Roll call for the consent. Okay, Simmons,
Yes.
Carol, Huckabee. Yes. Odom. Yes. Marks.
Yes.
Horace.
Yes.
Paredes.
Yes, the motion has passed. I will entertain a motion to accept the minutes as they are with the correction made by Mrs. Marks. So I have a motion. So moved. Do I have a second? Mrs. Huckabee? Okay. We have a roll call?
Okay, Huckabee. Yes. Odom. Yes. Simmons,
Yes.
Marks. Yes. Horace. Yes. Paredes.
Yes, and the motion is passed. Next on the agenda, we have approval of bills. This month, the bills were looked at by Mrs. Worth.
I have reviewed them. I had a question for Ms. LaBella, who quickly got back to me on the answer. It's about what would be, various vendors offer leasing of copiers, and, we'll get to the point where there's just one vendor that we're using, so she explained, that was the biggest thing, but, I have no major questions or issues.
Okay. So at this point, you would then say, I will
Read the motion.
I move that we accept approval, I recommend that we approve the bills as
In the amount.
in the amount of, okay. I don't have my glasses on, so. $713,598.32.
so moved.
Ms. Huckabee, second.
Can we roll call, Mrs. Bruno?
Okay, Simmons,
Yes.
Odom. Yes. Marks.
Yes.
Horace.
Yes.
Huckabee. Yes. Paredes.
Yes, and the motion is passed. Next on the agenda, we have approval of payroll. I will entertain a motion to approve the payroll in the amount of $1,989,517.19 for the month of December as presented. Mrs. Huckabee, and second, Mrs. Hoare. We have a roll call, Mrs. Bruno?
Okay, Marks.
Yes.
Odom. Yes. Simmons,
Yes.
Huckabee. Yes. Horace.
Yes.
Paredes.
Yes, and the motion is passed. Next on the agenda, we have discussion regarding superintendent's evaluation timeline. This is an information action item. Okay, so last year, what really needs to happen next in the timeline is that the superintendent needs to complete an evaluation or self-evaluation. Last year, that we had that evaluation on February 9th. So my suggestion is that, and I didn't get a copy of the evaluation tool to you yet, or do you have one? make sure that you get one. I can make a copy before we leave tonight. But we need to do several procedures. I'm just going to run through them real quick. So the superintendent needs to complete a self-evaluation and provide evidence to support ratings. Each board member completes an evaluation, providing a numerical rating and supportive commentary. The board president consolidates summaries into one document for review by superintendent. Board president and board vice president and superintendent review the document. The board and superintendent review evaluation. The board and superintendent then review evaluation. The superintendent provides response to evaluation. The board meets again. Ratings may change at this point. Final evaluation will go to file, and the superintendent response, if needed, will be provided by the superintendent, which basically means that if the superintendent is unhappy with or has a response to the final evaluation in any way, that he gets to make a statement, and then that goes into his final as well. So just to give you a timeline of last year, the superintendent self-evaluation was completed on February 9th, and I believe that our in February we have
February 23rd, we have a board self-evaluation.
February 23rd, we have a board self-evaluation. February, one second. The meetings schedule? February 8th, is it?
And the next one is the
22nd? Okay. Okay, so my thought is that we should have a self-evaluation with the self-evaluation tool completed by the superintendent on February 8th. This will give, from my perspective, enough time for the superintendent to complete that, given that he's already got a head start with the self-evaluation in November. Okay. And that at that point, we will all have access to that via Google Docs, which will go to myself or to Mrs. Harrell. She will collect those as board secretary. At that point, I think last year we had originally 4 weeks by which we were going to get back, we're going to respond to that self-evaluation. Only we added an extra 2 weeks to that because people weren't quite finished at the end of that 4-week period. But I think we should shoot for 4 weeks, which I think would put us at March, is it 14th?
From the 8th?
Yeah, February 8th. I think the
That's the 7th.
March 7th.
Yeah, that's March 7th.
Okay, is there a board meeting? Okay, is that in the middle of spring break though? I'm sorry. Was there something else on that day?
The board meeting is on the 14th.
Board meeting on the 14th. Okay. All right, so then why don't we say that that should be completed by March 8th, and then on the 14th, if we need to make that a fallback position, if for some reason people haven't had a chance to do that because life interfered, certainly that's something we can look at. But I think we really should shoot for having it done within that month, so we stay on schedule. Okay, so then at that point, on the 14th, by the 14th, myself, the board president, will have consolidated all the summaries into one document for review by the superintendent. And the board president, myself, and Mrs. Odom, the vice president, will schedule time to meet with the superintendent within a week or so to review the document. Okay, so we'll say roughly the week of, let's say the week of the 21st. Is that reasonable?
March 21st.
Yeah. And then, how long do you think it would take you to, how long did it take to review your evaluation last year? In terms of looking at that?
When is spring break?
I thought last week of
That's
March.
in March.
Week of the 28th.
Is it before or after Easter?
Easter's the following Mondays before spring break.
Okay. Okay, so when do you think you have time to provide a response to that? I believe that we wound up meeting, ultimately, the final evaluation was agreed upon April 25th, if I'm not mistaken, or somewhere about last year. Does that sound right, Mr. Simmons?
I don't disagree, that's what happened last year.
Okay. So why don't we, I'm sorry?
Was that because it was an election year?
It was an election year, we wanted to finish up before the new board.
Does it make sense? I'm not sure if there's a motion that's to be made or if we're just discussing this, but to begin an evaluation process in February, does that make sense?
It does in education, absolutely.
In April, rather than trying to finalize the evaluation at the end of the year?
You know what, this is kind of couched as, almost as a mid-year review. Teachers have evaluations roughly around the same time because you want to have an idea of how things are going before the end of the year. You know, I mean, it's, at the end of the, ultimately, at the end of this cycle, there should be a final discussion with the superintendent in June about how successful we were at reaching those goals. But this, in terms of your formal evaluation, very typically it's done starting like now. And the cycle, in terms of the superintendent self-eval, and really having some final evaluation from the board pretty much in April. And frankly, many people finish it up in March. That's just very typical.
Do you think that's a good idea for this board?
Yes, it is. I think it's a good idea for, if for no other reason, that there's always delays. There's always things that push things back, and I think you have to schedule these things to allow yourself, you know, in case life intervenes. Again, last year, we gave ourselves 4 weeks for us to look at the self-evaluation and come up with some sort of response for that. And by the end of that time, you know, with, you know, the time constraints, with, you know, people's jobs, families, we wound up not being able to do that and gave ourselves another 2 weeks. I think this is a good time frame to keep things in. And, you know, again, I mean, we're on an academic schedule. We're not on some other business cycle. And at the end of the year, in June, we have to have that conversation about how successful we were at achieving all the goals that we set out last year. Do you understand? Does that make sense?
And that's separate from the evaluation, which will be completed in April.
The formal evaluation will be completed in April. Yes.
The annual planning and evaluation cycle that is attached to your memo, is this what we approved last year when we created the tool for evaluation?
You're talking about this one?
Yeah.
Okay, so this is a general guideline for when you should have things done. And I think one of the good things about having a board retreat on February 23rd is, as a lot of board members have had time to digest and reflect upon self-evaluation, that, we'll be meeting with Perry Hill, and you can sort of help us through any sort of questions we have in our evaluation cycle early on. But anyway, going back to this is really a guideline. I mean, they have this in terms of, March, April, May, June. These are really targets where you want to have done these things. Ideally, we really want to have this completed by April and March.
So this is not the same cycle that we used last year?
I think this
when
is-
we did the evaluation.
Yeah, generally, this is actually the one last year.
Okay, that's all.
Yeah. This is the evaluation tool that we used last year. Again, I'll give you a copy of this. You guys can look at a copy. But this is what we agreed upon as this is a good tool to use.
Where did the tool come from?
The tool comes from working together with myself, Mrs. Harrell, who I hope to be here. She was actually the head of our committee, and Mrs. Langston, by which we had discussions. We looked at several different evaluation tools that we got from the association, and ultimately we came to this. We had a workshop with Barbara Tony, and she helped us work out some kinks and told us of some concerns that she had, and we tried to work through those. At the end, I think it was December 16th or 17th last year, at the end of which we really hammered out this, and then I believe at our regular board meeting in December, we all voted on this as our tool that we're going to use for evaluation.
The guidelines indicate board self-evaluation to be conducted October, November, December, in that time frame. Given the fact that it's scheduled now for the 23rd of February, does it make sense to have the superintendent complete a self-evaluation some 2 weeks prior to the board self-evaluation?
Well, yes, I do. And I think it makes sense because, really this is a process. And, the superintendent's self-evaluation is not going to hinge on how the board thinks it's working together as a group. Ultimately, the reason why we do a self-evaluation is the board needs to ask ourselves, have we been clear, in terms of what we want? Are there internal issues that we really need to hammer out going forward? We are one collective body that hires one employee. So as that collective body, how do we function as an employer? And I think what's important is that we have that prior to finishing the evaluation, so that it gives us a chance to look at the self-evaluation and really reflect upon our effectiveness as a board, and also reflect upon how we're evaluating during that cycle. And certainly if we have any concerns, we would have the benefit of having Perry Hill, who, even by Barbara Tony, has said that she feels he is an expert at this and would be a tremendous resource for us. So I think in terms of our timing of, and following the individual procedures, I think absolutely we can stick with our original timeframe of superintendent evaluation should be done in February, and that by March 8th, which is I think roughly 2 weeks after we've had a chance to meet with Mr. Hill, that we'll finish our, we'll have our self-evaluation, and we'll be able to finish the superintendent evaluation. That's my perspective.
I was thinking about it as well, while you were saying it, and the fact that we see how our schedules keep changing, which is why we have to keep pushing back our self-evaluation training, is evident that we need to just try to stick to the calendar. And even if things get thrown off course, then we at least have some leeway up until June, as opposed to pushing everything back to accommodate the self-evaluation that wasn't done in October. Then the next thing you know, something happens in all of our schedules, and we don't get that done. And next thing you know, we're in June, when Dr. Doster's trying to finish up the year, close out everything, get everything set for next year, and we're worried about an evaluation. So I don't think that it's, setting no, just in concrete that we have the schedule. It's just a guideline for us to follow, and when we have things that come up, then we have to be flexible to get it done. It may not be finished in April. It's just a guideline, and I'd like to just keep it that way for purposes of all of our calendars, our personal and professional calendars.
Any other comments?
I have two questions. One's
Sure.
related and one is kind of related on the margin. So related, my understanding, and I really do wish Mrs. Harrell was here tonight, we kept referring to this as a pilot program.
Last year we did.
Right, that was the first year we did it, so that's why we called it a pilot program. But the board we were supposed to go back and talk about how we felt the tool worked and whether we were going to adjust any pieces. And I don't believe we've ever had that conversation, so are we making this year 2 of a pilot program?
Last year, it was not a pilot program, but a rollout program. It was our implementation year, by which from my understanding, at the end of which we agreed that the tool was fine. I mean, in terms of what it did. It's ultimately just some sort of context by which you can self-reflect, you can evaluate. You have a rating scale that's based on 4, that mirrors the teacher evaluation.
I understand how it works, but when did the board discuss how it worked after we used it?
I think we did that at the end of the evaluation cycle. That's how I remember.
Could we wait and ask Mrs. Harrell about that since she did the tool, or could you go back and look at your notes? I'd like to be clear that the board actually discussed it, and that any recommendations, if we discussed it, there were some recommendations, where did those go?
I don't think there were any recommendations that I recall. Mrs. Odo, do you remember any recommendations on changing that? Or?
My thing is that I'm not an 11th-hour kind of person after the fact. So when I have concerns about something, then I voice them up front ahead of time,
Okay.
whether someone brings it up or not. And so it's irrelevant to me at this point because we're fully into this cycle now that started in June. That was clear that it started in this past 2015 June, the cycle of the evaluation, and now here we are in January of this cycle, and we're bringing up whether or not we talked about something last year in the end of 2014.
When we completed using the tool was when we finished it up in June. So we wouldn't have been able to evaluate how well the tool worked until after we were done using it. So that would have been from the period last summer until now, and we haven't had any discussions about the tool until tonight.
And no one
And have we
prohibited
provided-
anyone from doing that, from bringing up any concern they had
Right, it
all
hasn't
summer, as
appeared
you
on
said.
the agenda anywhere, which is the only place we can talk about things. Is that?
And you emphatically bring up 2020 over and over again, and has brought that to our attention that you brought up
I'm
the
going to talk about
attempt.
it too, I'm
to-
excited about it. Did you provide the tool to anyone? You mentioned you were going to give it to Mrs. Huckabee, but does anyone have that tool right now?
No, I'll make copies for you just by the time we're in
Because
executive
we did
session.
it, okay, we didn't have hard copies last year, that's my memory, we had.
I'm pretty sure we did.
You
As a matter of fact, we all got a copy of, by the time we were done with our,
Arbortoni, we went
Our
over
Arbortoni.
it, marked it up, and
Yeah.
when we did our.
But
We all got
submitted-
it.
We submitted everything online.
we did through Google Docs.
So will you be giving, that'll come to us then?
Yeah,
Okay, so you just said it would be printed, I just want to be clear.
short period of time.
But you didn't want to give it to us before so we could look at it? Because you guys haven't seen that, right?
Well, you know what, and as I was looking at this, it occurred to me that I hadn't got it to our new board members, or I don't believe I did, and that it just occurred to me that I should have, that's why I mentioned it.
Probably all of us. but we
Well,
might- we might have to do one.
You know what, I assume that you had it from last year, but that's okay.
How would we have it?
Because I was here last year, so you were here last year, and
But we submitted.
I got
it.
one last year.
But we submitted it.
But this is the tool itself. Okay, so this is not, just to clarify,
Yeah.
just so we're clear, this is not the evaluation, this is the tool. This is blank. It
Right,
has
the
things
tool
in
is
there.
online, we didn't have printed.
Yes, it is. And
Right.
the tool, as was populated by Dr. Duster for his self-evaluation, was online. That was sent to then all of us via Google Doc.
No,
Your
it
was-
wasn't, the form gets sent to you. You have to
The form.
resend us the form. We don't keep a copy of the form.
Okay.
Once we fill it out and send it.
Right.
So none of us have a copy of that form.
So again, once February rolls around and the superintendent has had a chance to complete the self-evaluation using the tool, which is this, which is blank, then I will then make sure that everyone on the board gets a online Google Doc by which you can complete and you can respond to that. And you can send it back to myself or Mrs. Harrell, who's the board secretary. You're with me?
It goes to one place, it goes to a doc is where it goes. It doesn't go to an individual.
Okay, when I say back, I don't mean that it's gonna fly to my house. I mean that electronically it will go to my control where I will then put them all together, which is one of the things on it. Okay, so,
So my tangential question was, we had a meeting with Mr. Hill. What is the subject of that? What is the topic of that meeting? Because you said that we're going to talk about the self-evaluation, but what, I thought that was
It's a board
it's a
self-evaluation.
board self-evaluation, but now we're also going to add in doing the superintendent.
I contacted him, he hasn't got back to me on
How
that.
long do we have scheduled for that meeting? And does that impact the amount of time we have for what we already have scheduled?
I don't think so. I haven't spoken with Mr. Hill since last year, meaning 2015. We're kind of playing phone tag a little bit, but as soon as I have that information, I will send it out to you and the rest of the board. I don't anticipate that that will be any problem whatsoever. I think that it's a fortuitous timing for meeting with Mr. Hill so that we are more effective in our evaluation process. So, February 8th.
With that, there's a lot of those things with my goals that may not be completed, so how you can deal with that?
Okay, I mean, it's an ongoing process. I mean, it's, kids have not graduated from 8th grade. I mean, it's really something, in terms of looking at your goals and board expectations, you know, how successful have you been in achieving that up to that point? Like the principals, you know, their kids are not out for summer, but they have to show something that they are, in fact, a good principal. And same with teachers as well. You have turned into the board a large binder with several, lots of evidence of, you know,
Mid-year progress.
things you've done mid-year, how it relates to your goals. So if you can add to that, since we got that, it would be great. Other than that, that's all we have. I mean, you can certainly say, this is where I would like to go. This is where I am in the context of achieving this goal. I think that's doable. But all that really is, you know, evidence that supports your narrative for your self-evaluation. One thing, you know, I think buildings and grounds, I mean, this is a random example, you know, we have almost completed the Parker project with just a few minor little tweaks here and there. I mean, great, that's certainly something. I mean, that's one component of the expectations laid out by your goals and objectives in maintaining the physical plan. You know, moving on to, you know, your management of, you know, financial matters. I mean, this is an ongoing process, so we can only do with what we have. Yes?
Evaluations are done by April. When is there an opportunity to go back and capture all of the goals that have or have not been met that occur between April and June?
Well-
I just want to know, as a board, when do we capture that and document it so that?
That's a discussion that we really should have in June. So in June, by the time, in June, toward the end of the month, we should have some final discussion about, you know, how effective we were at achieving our goals. And look, I mean, they're goals. Some of them are not. Yeah, they're 5 years. Some aren't going to be met right away. I mean, the rolling out of technology, there's a long vision. You know, building Parker was not something that was done. Okay, we're going to, you know, it's April. Okay, start. And I'm not trying to be dismissive.
Yeah, no, I get all that. I just want to make sure if goals are successfully met, that, you know, that Dr. set out to do between April and June, that there's an opportunity as a board to capture that and document it.
Absolutely.
So,
And we adjust in June.
yeah, I just don't want the April to June, whatever happens or does not happen, to float away. I just want to make sure we capture that and, you know, give credit and kudos, you know, whatever, but I just want, I mean, that, if there's a lot that will likely happen between April and, you know, and June.
Right.
And I think number 7 in the guideline for the time planning, number 7 provides for that opportunity.
It says, board meets again, ratings may change. And just as to discuss that, what that really means is, say, you know, you thought that the buildings and grounds were a total disaster. Parker is now be expected. It should have been painted red, you know, or school colors on the outside, or it should have camouflaged into the background. Whatever your position, when we all meet together and, you know, we'll all have a chance to see what everyone said, you may say, well, you know what, actually, having looked at what everyone had to say, I've kind of changed my mind on that, and now I'd like to, you know, make this comment. And at that point, the board kind of agrees as one body on kind of one evaluation. So it's not 7 different voices coming, but at the same time, the superintendent will have access to see what individual comments were, but also it's an opportunity for individual board members to change their mind or to make a plea that actually it's good that we can paint Parker, it looks beautiful just the way it is. Any other comments? So we agree that
Yeah,
February.
no, I would, sorry. You know, because we did, and our minutes reflect it, we did discuss it, we reiterated, the board did reiterate that this year that we did that was a pilot year. Perhaps we should now, because it wasn't codified, put in place procedures to, at the completion of this review cycle, have the board take a few moments at the next meeting when we're done to review whether the tool is working. And it would be 2 years, so I suppose that would be pretty good, whether the tool is working. But could we codify that now? Because it was lost
Okay.
you know, after the board did decide last December
Okay,
this
so
would be a pilot program that was lost somewhere.
okay, so June or April, when would you like to do
Well, it's
this?
not my decision, it would be one.
Okay, but it's your idea. I think it's a great idea.
It doesn't matter if it's a good idea or a bad idea, it's the board's decision if they'd like to do that. And I'm suggesting that we codify it.
Yeah, that sounds great.
My recommendation would be that at the end of the year, as Mrs. Horth points out, I get to see Dr. soon eventually, right? Okay. As for now, Mrs. Horth points out, the cycle really does complete in June. So I would think that that would be the more likely time to do that kind of reflection.
That sounds great. Anyone else have a comment on that, or you disagree? Sounds good to me. Okay, so, are we agreed then, February 8th for self-evaluation completion?
I would try to get them, yeah.
Okay, and, you know,
If I have concerns, I'll give you a call.
okay. All right, then, and then we can, and then I think with that understanding that we should really shoot for March 8th to try to have this done in terms of having the board respond to the self-evaluation. And worst case scenario, you know, we don't get it done because life has intervened, and then we can have a conversation about that, you know, certainly when we meet with Perry. But I'm going to strongly encourage everybody to respect the hard work their superintendent has done and try to match that timeline. Okay. Any other comments or questions? Okay, so with that, I will entertain a motion to enter into executive session related to personnel, 5 IL CS 120/2C1, and student residency, 5 IL CS 120/2C10. Mrs. Brito, take a roll call.
Okay, Ford? Yes. Huckabee? Yes. Oda? Yes. Simmons?
Yes.
Mark? Yes. Gray?
Yes, the motion is passed.